Evening. Welcome to the Council of the City of Huntington on prior to the business education led by myself. Please give you thanks for this and serve your Holy Spirit would guide, grant us wisdom for our city and our heritage. We would have a celebrating what it means. Amen.
Allegiance to the nation of
We're beginning with a roll.
Funk is absent.
Just a correcting of city business, then we'll move along to consideration of the minutes. Is there a motion to bring those to the consideration?
So moved.
Second, regarding the minutes and consider. Or hearing favor. Christie?
Hamilton.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to commissions. Charlie?
I have no report. The Lime City Economic Development at the end of West, actually our development that's there and to it looks pretty bright.
Thank you. Dwight? BJ?
I dropped off papers to everybody here. Back of that for the 2000 at the West Station. Hazard out at the old landfill at a turn drop-offs. CFL collect and Huntington 141 for solid waste.
Solid waste.
Development, we have completed 7 projects, 24 million. The 18 year, the age, nearly 8 marks 10. Gift income is on track to meet, and on a couple is trying but our so if they use water, that we can fit their needs. Done. Electricity on to hold. There's a bunch of we can. We have. Yeah. 30 what?
If I make
stuff.
capacity is the.
We got to come in, so bring them on in. Yeah. Thank you. That's it.
Any questions? Thank you. Andrew?
Couple of infrastructure street. So on this project, wrap up pretty well. Finally, looks like back to asking for HK port soon. So we'll be on track to begin this.
Questions for Andrew? Charlie, any? Moving along under old business, the item, it's 10C.
25, ordinance if adopted would vacate an alley right-of-way street Eastwood Alley, Beard Street, north between known as Smith, Honey Mobile Estate, right-of-way reading.
Thank you. Is ordinance 10C25 to the floor for second reading adoption?
So moved.
Motion and second. For in favor of approval?
Felton,
Yes.
Thank you. We have final reading. Christie?
resolution if adopted would provide the company with a property tax for a number of new manufacturing equipment or statement of benefit. This is for new 5-year or would be 100 to 100% year 6. Here.
So is there a 5 to the floor for consideration?
So move.
Second.
Second, as you mentioned, we have Kendall Mick. You. Like about the
consideration this evening, and a special thanks to Incipio Device for here with and company that's 60 project investments review this fundamental thing. Remind ourselves the both in the industrial consumption, employee, and community, especially so. President not In addition, then, it's not an entire reward. You really lose, make the investment. The currently have discussion. This discussion is only and required for the statement is
No. Lighting. Locally owned. Corporate. See. Appreciate your consideration.
Questions or 25?
For showing up usually on these tax abatements out there. We love, it's just local in Huntington.
Kendall, is increasing production for new market where we think we're going to be by the end, again, similar that ended up we don't. So those are some of the. We could explode really. Good. Thank you.
By council members. Further discussion of resolution 5.
Yes.
Felton.
Yes.
Yes, the next item we have is a town redevelopment for council this evening. Action on direction and specific action. In 2020, I was invited to go with Steve Kimmel and Matt Ditzler to a process they were working through with their local community foundation, USA, to address many communities, others, where you're down either ownership, maybe structure music built to ADA access. It was taking some steps and trying to figure out what that would look like. Matt did some of how the with that reconnected present to us tonight. Community to full and considering, and so we have some evening to this matters for. I think, and council has support private venture investment. is able to redevelop and take care of stock and have those buildings and bring them. And so this is if council this building would be a private entity holder of that building is to help cap for the vendor at a later date. Come up and about one ambassadors and members of that non forward at this time. You are. And they all know to speak, so.
Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity this evening. First of all, I appreciate you volunteering. A lot of people. I'm listening to an idea. Having in the city, seen many of how to building, what to spot, or many, because so many people own different reasons. Their idea mesh together to vision. This is the best for ask around a solid to listen presents no, just making that plainly clear.
That was 3. That's what he said. You only have to say 3 sentences. Hi, my name's Marge Heiner. Rated a years. Owned people that took care of us. That still to is Huntington Grove. Also know whenever you bring Boys and Girls Club, and they really need to. Didn't, but board interview and I've been the ever since. It was a very good presentation and supported this evening, and I also consider it as a
Breaker. Well, I community 37 years to just with a lot of impact and the need. I also see the need for our community to invest in our downtown. I was very chosen investor in this. I would love to see. I also to see the have as far transport, we see so think
At least the interest. Some of the surrounding, what they've done with a little bit of work to do. There's always opportunity to bring community outside project also.
With the county, the, as Richard, this go and others are ready opportunity. We're excited process some other things. Excited about the pre with support financially, and we are capital investment as
Council, I want to introduce Eric Doden, who's here with us. Is joining us remotely. That heard from SAP council.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a real privilege. When you come here, there's so many great things about hunting. Buildings. Hope you, as much as we do, and that the things we can. 5 minutes, just giving you a Q&A. So I grew up in communities, 2 towns. Getting to see the when I was 18 and 19, town that we city. So that's what we did, right? We thought we had to do. I mean, cost us. Eventually becomes the mayor. With my wife, Macy. We married from 2001 to see a train. And it's been running businesses my whole to make communities. Trying to figure out tools that and in presentation 15 years worth of minutes. If I'm throwing a lot of numbers, give me information, questions that you. So this is of help with mental health things that need and over the Rhine to extort from where it is to AC. There's modern ADA compliant, a lot of background history and getting model group helped us with our tax credit and that here. Town challenge that we've model how go through analysis work buildings and then we included charity and building decline studied numerous and the average town at 10 of historic assets down. That average per foot down. This begins to address that issue model. It is to properties 5% of what we in restaurant space. Unique this is only saw town that may or vision people find that is they 50,000 realized on average process to build $1 million. Well, there's 1.5 million. So they run out realize that this isn't size and growth average tax credits that currently direct about other make money. Fee. About 2 years, think about percent in a development fee, GC fee, to work. Some developers firm, but the third is called terms is $1 million, and they 50 developers build wealth. We've done state taken all that profit out of the community. Our fee for service, they fee and GC the profit of the community. For instance, versus the typical buys the credits to the developer for the building, and then they 7 years for profit. Statewide leader the other day sounds like, but what I do is when we give and building for 20 million of our incentives at stage they're using in a very good point. Their own debt and equity local, then game, but as soon as you model should be that the community company. The company before I go and then over $1 billion, keep that because it's So when you're a trustee, you're the cash flow from the you have to give a amount of money every year because you're a trustee, you know, just your debt and cash flow, also grant that we've surrounded ourselves with the model because it's not just making you as a community. And that's a lot more. So the 24 months property are the patient persistence. On that makes people months or maybe find a person that not ready to sell. So that often, but 18, it's about a 12 day. What you don't find it until you have 10 go. That's and then you don't in the middle. Once you know what, and then you begin to apply for. If you close, you'll have a time. We have a that and from that so within you're delivering so now it's square footage lease the restaurant space party planning. My kids tell you that plan you guys as you can that they'll spend be a we say is houses are 10,000 they have this 50 square 6,600 building. We were square buildings were so 4,000 to buy own buildings. Show this where you had about 10 people that were really wanting to process to get there. We did in $6 million project residential space 26 debt 1 point tells you dollars of to help small town like owning that you they say what can phase right now is a 2,000 square foot producing units debt and equity 18 million of it came from you can do the math on day one that's makes this powerful. Now we're and what that means is that your work with we have to change we're not going to go to the census right that we and kind of identified 2.1 value is 22. And so like buildings trust you purchase project because that is the mind at a table as more goals every day is the strategy that we have. Said that we have capitalized forward and what price and total stack, and then we'll go on these. Let's say that at $20 project, 20 buildings, 10 national credits program by right. To apply for that program, you from new market credits that process one east, but it is usually we tax credit or the a small town with them that opportunity. We've had a small town from a bank and of that or so some might be capital off time with it as you restore them. We're working on some wide fund that with Sagamore that are that would also that could be used at a meeting. So with is that you happy to yes.
So you're doing all the work to get us the government grants and all that stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we generally bring as the together. So what found we've seen high net. We are also state. We're bringing a in Van Wert, Ohio. You know this because when you're they working for we might they want to behind it and the foundation that's what they're looking for. A whole group of people to
and are they getting back?
%.
Okay.
We asked them for the 5 years and the property request. Sometimes they define pay when they loan, they'll accrue it. So we for 5. We've had some got some found, but portfolio money and giving it, stocks and bonds, investment, but and supposed to be street money at 5%. Works.
Current environment, are tax credits a stable thing?
Here's my approach to that. Yes, until I know. Because what a tax credit is all private money. What basically the government is saying, both federal and state, is if you give you a, that's what it is. But saying reduction. Taxes up. Right. Money's going and above. And so that's always about not simply saying and give you a tax deduction for that. So more positive from about this for small, but say that small towns are election. So I think for these people to be supported.
So you mentioned population is or
So it's easy to tell,
too early?
but 100 anecdotally, people have come from other cities, and so in a residential side with that too, because they're apartments. But by getting them really, but they were just nervous. Okay, we're left, and so very quick fill up. Engage is specifically the restaurant business right now, but also, you know, had what business is that when you have a benefit place into your much thing that we have to. I mean, I will. This will be ever in some of the for my personal deal to it's a $280 million to death in the United States. Ban so many. We days that now seeing it goes by, the grateful that we hard work and it's worth doing.
So you'll a board for oversight. You start at property, acquire property management. Decides what happens to what buildings.
The way that I've seen it done, they'll do a total model of the building. They have some really cool, devices now that give them, every single nook and cranny of that building. They'll do that for every building and then begin to look at how do we Like one of the things we like to do, for example, is have elevators at the ends on a stack of, 10 buildings so that you get ADA compliance, but you don't have, millions of dollars of elevators in every building. So you're looking for cost savings, they're looking for maximum use of the facility, they're looking for, how to work even with city council, because sometimes we've had to get special ordinances to allow for housing in the back half of a first-story building. Because, you don't want to necessarily have too much retail or office space, so you want to, have some flexibility with the first floor, but you don't want, front-facing, residential. So there's all kinds of, creativity that goes into that process to determine what's the highest and best use of a building. And in some cases, the engineers come in and say, this building can't be saved. And that's when you got to look at not adaptive reuse, you look at, do we tear down and build new? So these are all the decisions that the Board of Managers will make with professionals. I'm not an architect nor am I an engineer, so I do rely on these experts, but we have a whole group of people that they'll interview and choose from. And we're getting more all the time of people that are excited about, this historic preservation and adaptive reuse.
What
Now,
is this?
sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. What is this doing to, in Van Wert, when you guys go through and buy the buildings, whatever, is that shutting down the businesses completely that are in it currently? Or are they selling it and still operating?
Yeah, so what we've been able to do is actually they sell it and still operate. There's a period of time where we have to go in and acquire the tax credits and design the building. But there's also, we've been able to phase it. So you fix these 20 buildings over here, then you're able to look at, we had one bridal shop, for example, that was at the corner in Van Wert. She really didn't want to move, but she knew she had to move at least temporarily to get that space fixed. Well, when she saw the new space that was a block down, she got so excited, she just moved permanently. So we often are working all the time with our local retailers, our local restaurant owners. A lot of them realize they don't want to own the buildings anymore. What happens to them many times is they forget about the second, third, and fourth story, and then they have a water issue or a roof issue, and all of a sudden they have a huge expense that they're not planning for in their capital budgets. And so they would rather be a tenant, but they don't necessarily want the hassles of owning a historic building that needs to be restored. And so we just work with them very closely to make sure that their needs are met, and then we try to, make their life as easy as possible, and that's always, as you can imagine, a negotiation all the way around. But we found really creative ways to manage that process.
With that being said, what is the rental cost for retail space?
Well, and again, that's a negotiation. So what I love about this model, the trust company doesn't have to maximize its profit. So let's say that they really want a certain kind of restaurant or a certain kind of retail shop. They may decide that, for that, we're going to have a lower rate, or we're going to do creative things like, hey, we're going to do this as a % of sales rather than an actual rate. And there's a lot of businesses that like % of sales because that way, their success is tied to the success of the business, or at least they know exactly what their rent rate is. So that's a business decision that the Board of Managers will make about, what the proper rate will be. And then obviously location matters. So, if you got a corner building, that's probably going to be a little higher rate. If you got a building in the middle, that's generally a little lower rate. Those are all decisions that will have to be made as well. And you're always balancing, the profitability of the trust company, because this is a nonprofit business with the needs of the community. And that's what I like about this model, is that's a better balance than just trying to make the most money possible. When you're dealing with a developer that owns a building, what are they trying to do in 7 years? Flip it for the what? Biggest profit they can make. That means that they're going to charge as high of rents as possible regardless of the situation. This trust model gives you a lot more flexibility with that.
How many of these have you done, and what kind of success have you had with the other ones? Is Van Wert the first one?
Van Wert is the first.
Okay.
We're acquisition of property now in Hillsdale. I think it's about 180 square foot that's now in the process of being designed. And then we are in right now about 6 cities in Indiana. So the first thing we had to do in this process is prove that we could actually do it. And now that they've seen that we can do it, now it's time to get busy and scale it. Our stated goal and objective, and I, make no apologies for this, we want to restore 85 county seats in the next 20 years. And I'm going to work my tail off to develop competitors to me that will begin to help scale this up. But selfishly, I want places like Huntington to be first and best. The old adage in marketing is either you're first or best. It's nice to be both. So I have a real passion for this region and for our communities here. And but the project, let me put it this way: if we can pull this off in Van Wert, Ohio, we can pull it off anywhere. It's one of the toughest markets that you can pull it off in because of the distress of that community.
It's, I've been there, I was there a few years ago, and I was trying to sell there, and it's tough.
Yeah. I think the first time, I'll just tell you this, my dad, I love my dad, but he was like, the first time we closed a $28 million project, I think he basically said to me, well, that's cute. And, and that's, because he's a small town guy, and he's like, a little bit like, I'm not sure about this. When we closed the second $20 million project, he calls me up and says, what in the world are you doing? Explain how you're doing this. So that's the kind of thing that's beginning to happen now, is you're beginning to attract these highly successful families who have grown up in small towns, who want to see their small town, restored, and they're getting engaged because they realize that, this is not just doable, but needs to be done.
Eric, there are two stories I picked up on over our conversations the last couple of years in the visit to Van Wert, and I'd like you to share those with council to underscore a couple things that I know for me were front of mind concerns. The first is share about the story in the public meeting or the public setting in Van Wert where you were sharing this with the community, and the gentleman talked about an out-of-town developer purchasing, and then I've got a follow-up to prompt you after that one.
Yes, we had a town hall meeting. I'm going to guess we had about 50 people in the room, and so I get done with explaining what we're going to do, and the gentleman raises his hand in the back and says, I don't want some rich developer out of Indianapolis coming up, buying up our town. And I started laughing. I said, well, first of all, I'm not from Indianapolis. I'm from Fort Wayne. Second of all, we can debate how rich I am. You can ask my wife, if she would like me to be richer. I said, but third of all, we're not buying up anything. You're owning yourself through your foundation. And it got real quiet, and it was game, set, match. They're so used to the old model where the developers coming in and literally buying up the town that they had not oriented themselves to this as a completely different model where the community owns itself through a trust and a foundation. And by the way, I use trust very intentionally, because when you say a trust, what does trust signify? Long-term, trustworthy. And it makes people ask the question, what's a trust? And that we want them to, as a trust is a 501c3 that all the profits go back to the benefit of the community. And it's a trust that holds things in perpetuity. So we suggest that when you do this model, that you never sell these buildings. If you own them and you fix them, you can make sure they're maintained. If you sell them, that doesn't, the new owners may or may not maintain them. So that's kind of why we use the word trust. What's your second?
So the second, Eric, oftentimes in a situation like this, the question that comes to mind is, what about somebody who's not ready to sell? There's a variety of reasons why a family or someone might not be able to. If I remember correctly, there was an ice cream shop in downtown Van Wert. You know the one I'm talking about?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, if you could share that.
Yeah, so this family, unfortunately, the father had owned this ice cream, had been a proprietor of this ice cream shop. He passed away suddenly, and they had locked the door when he passed away, and that became sort of the remembrance of their father. So you can imagine the emotions as you're approaching them. Hey, we want to buy your building and restore it. And it was just a very patient process, helping them go through the grieving process because, they had to grieve. And this was part of their grieving process, but then we began to help them understand how we were going to honor the legacy of their father through this process, and just got really creative with them. But this is what I call it. This is human. This is patience. This is persistence. Is being there for them, helping them through the process of their grief. We're not coming in here viewing them as an object or as something to needs to get done. We're very human in this process. I think what we see people that own their buildings and don't want to sell is we view them as our partners. If they're good building owners and they don't want to sell, we don't see them as competitors. We see them as partners but they also see us as their exit strategy when they are ready to retire or sell. And that's when the partnerships really get formed, because they realize that we're not here to compete with you. We're actually going to, with the project we're doing, increase the value of your property. And they see then us as partners, and as when they're ready to move on, we become the natural person that they come to. The key to us is being able to close quickly and efficiently. If you can close in 30 days, then you're sending a message to people that, that makes them see you as their preferred buyer.
Other question, comment by council members at this time? Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
A couple quick things I want to reiterate again and just underscore to make sure we're clear on this. So as Eric just shared, one of the things I appreciate most about the strategy is it doesn't force out the current owners. It can be patient. Another thing I deeply appreciate is it's not ownership by city government. It is a nonprofit trust with board from the community. It allows us to harness economies of scale. And as much as we're talking about doing something new, the reality is we're using very conventional, standard financial tools and real estate development deals. We're just applying them in a smaller market. And so, Council, you have a letter from me. You've heard from members of our community. And what I would like is an indication from Council of if you're open to us bringing back a specific proposal, looking at an additional appropriation and looking to capitalize this with an initial loan from the city on this. And so we can bring that detail and answer further questions, but I would like guidance from council if you're open to that and would like to see something more specific and concrete.
Personally, I'd like to see this move forward, something that Ms. Heiner said. There's been many expansions in Huntington already, the YMCA, Huntington University, Parkview's grown. I think this is just a potential opportunity to see major growth in Huntington. I think it's what we need to do looking forward.
Also, I was in the HQ meeting this morning, and we had a couple people talking about some businesses. Oh, Mark was talking about, we have some businesses that were looking to come in here, but it's so hard to find housing for their employees. So if there's a lot of residential in this, it's going to help a lot as far as giving people be able to live in town and just drive to work instead of having to live in Fort Wayne or Roanoke or whatever else they can find a place to, because the driving does wear on you after a while if you have to drive a long way to get to work. And I truly believe, since, first of all, how often do you ever see leader? I know all these guys, ladies and guys, and how often do you get to see all the leaders excited about something like that universally? Not very often. So when you've got people like that that are ready to push something, and Marge, sorry I'm going to call you out, but when Marge wants something done, it gets done. I'm just saying, as a history of this in the town, I'm not kidding. So when you've got people like that that are supporting something like this, I think it's a really good idea, and I'd like to at least see the next steps of it, presentation, see where we're at on it, and that type of thing. It sounds like a good thing, and I appreciate you coming to present. You have really good energy, very understandable. You don't use big words for me, thanks. But yeah, it looks like something that we could really get behind and help the city out. So.
One of the things that I like about it, been on council for a while, been in Huntington for a long time. The one thing that I think it does is add some cohesion and direction to downtown. For how many decades, everybody kind of does their own thing. Some succeed, some fail. But this kind of project brings some cohesion where things are done with some forethought. Somebody's managing it. And then having the organization taking over more and more buildings, I think is a good idea, because then there's a benefit for that group to make sure that things are taken care of, are maintained, are up to date, which is hard to do when you have what's happening now. And we've got a lot of great downtown businesses, and they do a great job. I like the idea that they're gonna be your partner, they're gonna be partners, but then somebody can come alongside them and fill in and around the edges. I think that's good.
I'd like to go next step as well. Particularly what Charlie said, I think having more comprehensive strategic thinking going on for downtown is really important. So.
I feel good about it because if you got people like this behind the program, I think it'll be a very, very successful deal and a wonderful opportunity for the community. I mean, we certainly need it. This kind of backing over here, these guys are all go-getters. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think I'd be interested in seeing things, or at least get some sort of a official proposal at some other time. See what we're going to work with. I mean, between the city, the county, school corporation, local businesses, industry, like who doesn't want Huntington to grow? And this could be a real good shot in the arm. And oftentimes, like the best return on investment is the early investment. So if we can be, one of the early investors, it'd be something that I'd be willing to consider.
I think another thing I want to touch on before we call this quits is there, even in my lifetime, we've seen so much changes in downtown Huntington. I'm sure you guys have all seen massive changes. But kind of like Eric said, the changes that he had growing up in his hometown, now we have the opportunity to make those changes or see the massive growth that is potential with Huntington. I think it's definitely worth moving forward.
Thank you, Council, for the direction on that. We will get specifics to you for your consideration, and we'll continue to move this process forward with the local folks that are interested, as well as our hopefully future partners at PAYGO. One last note on this too, as far as the initial consulting fees on this, so far there is interest from Mr. Ditzler mentioned about the Community Foundation making an investment on that. We also have a private family foundation that is willing to underwrite a good chunk of those consulting fees up front as well, so that'll be detailed and laid out as well. So with that then, we'll close the discussion for this time. We'll bring a specific proposal back for council's consideration. Appreciate your time and patience with it this evening. As you ponder this and chew on it, again, this is all in public meeting for a reason. So run the idea by folks and just be clear on what we're talking about, what we're not talking about, get more feedback. We've had that conversation already with about 50-some people in the community, and they all land right where council did tonight. Like, this sounds good, let's take the next step. So with that then, last item on the agenda, Christie, monthly budget reports.
Yes, we ended May, we had $8,400,000 in general fund, $1.9 million in MBH, park fund, and airport, $112,000. As far as seated, we spent $60,427 in May, year-to-date $420,000. And our balances are right on track for this time of year, and we will be receiving June settlement here in the next week or so. So I'll bring that back to you for the June 30th balances next month.
Any questions for Christie on the financial picture? Okay, last item for the good of the order is just, as council's aware, is that with the changes at the State House that Dwight alluded to earlier, we have engaged Reedy Financial Services to do a deep dive on the financial impact for the city and other overlapping units of government, and those materials will then be brought to council in the July meetings so that you have that information as we look out ahead at the next couple of years and what that impact will be for us, which again underscores all the more reason to make investments in improving AV and attracting more people to our community. With that then, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.